Date is May 26, 1995. Interview with survivor David Bloch. Mr. Bloch, when you were in the camp and you were in the barracks, how did you communicate with the rest of the inmates?
I could lip read. I was a pretty good lip reader.
Did you feel part of the community there?
Oh yeah, we were all Jewish, so we had that in common, and that was the tie that bound us. It was a big surprise. No one would believe that when I slept I would dream, and in the dream I was told that I was free. In the dream I actually believed I was free. And that it was back into the camp, back into formation, back into marching. And when I finally was freed, it was a big surprise. It was an incredible surprise that I was actually freed.
Within the barracks, you were able to communicate with the rest of the inmates, and you didn't feel separated. Beforehand, in Munich and in Bavaria, did you feel part of the community?
No, there was friction. I did not. I mean, as far as being a Jewish person, people stayed away from me. People kept a wide distance.
But what about within the Jewish community?
Oh yeah. Of course, they were very good to me, and we were of like mind. And but outside the community, outside the Jewish community, no.
Did you go to synagogue?
I went on and off to synagogue. On the high holidays, of course, I went. You know, the temple teachings were things that I learned from my friends. The Jewish teachings I learned more through friends than temple.
Did you have many Jewish deaf friends, or most of your deaf friends not Jewish?
Surprisingly enough, I didn't have a lot of Jewish friends because, as I said, from my school days, I was the only Jewish boy there. The first Jewish deaf person I met was in Frankfurt.
What year?
That was around the same time. You know, but otherwise, you know, I was the only Jewish deaf person that I knew until that time.
How did you communicate in general with people who didn't speak sign language?
As I said, I did not have a lot of contact with non-Jewish people because of the friction. And so I kept my distance too from a lot of people because I didn't want any conflict. So in a way, I really just kept my distance. It was easier that way. Because who knows when they're going to grab you and take you somewhere that you don't want to go.
In your free time, did you used to do a lot of artwork?
Well, yeah, I did art. Um, but I was so poor, I couldn't even afford them. I couldn't afford clothing and shoes, so, all I had to eat at school was soup. Even my school was so poor. You know what I mean? Oh, I'm sorry. I would have to end up going to a soup kitchen.
And did you always live on your own?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I did. Always.
Were you lonely, or did you like that?
I was very used to it. That was the way my life was.
Now back to when you were in Dachau.
Mm-hmm. And what we did mostly in Dachau was marching. And as I said before, I would dream of being free. Sorry. To school. After Dachau, once I became free, I went to the academy. And at that point, they said, no, you're not welcome here any longer. So there was no more schooling for me. I said, but I'm willing to pay. I've got money for this. But anyway.
But still, while you were in the camp, is all they had you do march back and forth the whole day?
Yep, that's what we spent, we spent most of our time doing. The organization had not really planned for us to do other things at that time. So we would march in the rain.
Did you know any other plan they had for the future?
I didn't know. I wasn't told. I mean, we as people were worthless. We were nothing to them. We were just a number. We were just numbers.
Did anyone try to escape the camp?
Escape? No, that would be crazy. That would be suicide.
Was there any...
And a lot of artwork was actually done there. A lot of people would work on art, but then often we would notice people missing suddenly. And when we noticed someone missing, we would go silent. And you'll see in my picture what kind of conditions we lived in. We would have to march and walk for hours without being able to eat, without going to the bathroom.
Was there roll call every day?
No. I mean, look how many people. If you'll see my picture, you'll see how many people were there, and
now,
that was impossible.
You mentioned something about doing artwork in Dachau. How is that possible?
No, that was a misunderstanding. That's not what I said. If you tried to do anything other than march, you were just told to stop it and shut up.
Now, was there any Jewish life in the camps? Did anyone try to have a holiday or do anything of a religious symbolism?
No, it was impossible. Absolutely impossible.
So how long were you there for before you were freed?
4 weeks.
And how were you freed?
Well, it was a total surprise to me. But and I don't even know. I don't know how it happened. When the Second World War started, things had begun to get worse and worse and worse. But before that time, it was a little different.
And one day, the Germans just called you and said, "You're free to leave."
They called names out. What they did was they just you know.
And to this day, you still don't know if someone from your family tried to get you out, or if it was just arbitrary that the Nazis picked specific people.
And I think they just picked people. I think they just chose people.
And how did you have the gumption, the strength, to still go back to the academy?
Well, the man at the school knew me, and he basically just said, "Sorry, can't come in here anymore." It, but even money wasn't. Okay, I'm not understanding. Sorry.
Did you want to go back to any of your aunts or uncles?
Okay, still on something else here. Painting something.
Did you want to go back to your aunts and uncles?
To visit, sure. To visit,
So
but not to live.
what did you do in 1938 after you left Dachau?
I looked for a job. And I eventually joined a painting business and did like house painting.
It was a German business?
No, Jewish. I mean, there were, actually it was a German business. There were a couple of Jewish guys who worked.
And how long did you work there?
Oh, I can't remember exactly, a few months maybe.
And then what happened?
I went here and there. I can't remember everything that I did.
Well, what was the next stage?
Well, I stayed in Europe for a while, wandering about. There were certain, like, soup kitchens where Jewish people could go to get soup.
Was it difficult because you felt you couldn't communicate?
No, I was able to communicate in German. I really was able to speak German pretty well. And yet, life just wasn't easy. I certainly couldn't afford to go to the movies or go to the theater, but I did go to the mountains. I went to the Alps. And I was, I could ski and I could see the beauty of the mountains. It was a great pleasure. There was nothing else for me to do. I was always a loner. I didn't, I never really had friends around.
And after wandering throughout Germany for a while, what was the next stage?
Oh, I would always ride my bicycle, things like that.
And then what happened?
one day, in 1940, 7 o'clock in the morning, a letter came by cable from New York, from America. It said 3 words. It said, China, go now.
Shanghai.
Okay, this is in German, which I'm not sure.
Now,
So 1 month later, I left. This was on April 19th, 1940. I went to China.
how did you get the visa to go to China?
At that time, there was to help Jewish people. China was the only place to go. Even America was not accessible. All I needed to do was show money. And my family did contribute money, which came to us $400 for my passage to China in 1940. And I have a painting of it.
Now, did other members of your family, extended family, did they also leave and go to China?
No. No, I was the only one who did.
Do you know whereabouts afterwards?
Well, my brother went to New York. 2 of my brothers went to New York. My sister went to Israel. But as far as uncles and more extended than that, they disappeared. And I did not have communication with them. I was alone.
It was not difficult then to get the visa to China?
No, it wasn't necessary at that time. I didn't need a visa.
And how did you travel to China?
Boat.
How long did it take?
4 days. 4 weeks.
And what was that boat ride like?
Oh, it wasn't a bad boat. I remember, at least I had something to eat on the boat. So, I'll never forget it.
Were you with any other friends or any acquaintances that you knew?
Yeah, well, I made friends on the boat. So I had communication and contact with new friends on the boat. But we were all very, very poor. Extremely so. I couldn't buy pants, I couldn't buy shoes. Couldn't pay for a piece of candy. No cigars, no cigarettes, nothing.
Was your intention when you got to China to eventually go to America? Or was it to stay in China?
I had no intention. I didn't have a plan. I was penniless, and so I was going where the wind took me. But yet, as I said, I was still an optimist. And I tried to make the best of it. I spoke to people in China. I met a girl, a wonderful girl, a Chinese girl. And we went together, became husband and wife. And this was in 1939. Met her in 1939, married in 1946.
Now, when you had received the note from your family in America that said go to China, did they mean go to China and then from there try to leave to America? Or did they mean go to China because they knew that was safe?
To tell you the truth, it wasn't that clear. I had a cousin who offered me passage to Brazil, but apparently the Jews were having trouble in Brazil also, so that was out. My brothers wanted to help me, and this way seemed like the only opportunity.
And when you arrived in China, what city were you in?
Shanghai.
Now, did the Chinese at that time accept you and try to help you?
They were wonderful people. Never gave me any friction, not for a moment. Very humble people and very nice people. Very human, even though I was poor.
Did you try...
And I met many Chinese deaf friends as well.
Did you try to belong to the community of the Chinese or to the other Jews who went to China?
I was open to all, and they were open to me.
Was there any anti-Semitism in China?
Well, at that time there was... okay, let me back up. Well, that was the same time that China was at war with Japan. You know that. And there was German influence in Japan. And in 1943, the Jews were put in a ghetto.
Were you also put in that ghetto?
In Shanghai, there was a ghetto, yes.
Did the Chinese try to fight against the Japanese and help you?
No, but there was an occupation, the Japanese occupation in China.
Now, during the during the Japanese occupation, and you were put in a ghetto, were you part of the Mirror Yeshiva?
I'm not familiar with that. I don't know. I've never heard that term before. What does it mean?
It means there was a big group of Jews that left to China and were in Shanghai.
There were many, right? There were many such groups. Yeah, which I was not involved in. No, I was not. There were a variety of Jews from various places.
Before 1943, did the Chinese help you find a job?
No. No one had a job. I mean, no, it was unbelievable. It was that in that way it was terrible.
So what did you do?
I went hungry. God watched over me. I painted, I did some woodworking, and tried to keep my hands busy, and tried to make connections with people there, even though I couldn't hear.
How did you meet your wife at that time?
Well, she was deaf, so that was a natural connection. It wasn't easy, but I just met her. We talked. We became good friends at first, as I did with many others. And she's no longer alive, unfortunately. and I've heard that many of my other Chinese deaf friends have passed away since, too. Shanghai was a wonderful place to learn. That was a chapter in my life.
So even though the war was going on, you had some good experiences.
Oh, yes. Certainly. Absolutely. One day in 1945, there came a formation of airplanes bombing over Japan. And that was very close to my home. Very close to my home. I felt the impact. Very frightening. I remember my heart jumped that day many times.
Did you know what was going on in Germany and in Poland and about the Holocaust?
No.
Nothing?
No, there was no such communication. The Japanese had control of the media, the newspaper, so we heard nothing.
When Jews would come after you had already arrived in China, did they tell you what was going on in Germany and in Poland?
Not much. They didn't. No, it's a newspaper.
And at what point exactly did the Japanese put all the Jews into a ghetto?
That was in 1943. That's since... sorry, I don't understand.
And in 1943, was this ghetto an open ghetto or a closed ghetto? Were you allowed to continue working?
Yeah, you were allowed to work. Some people had work. I didn't.
So what did it mean that it was a ghetto? Was it just that the living quarters were all together?
We weren't confined. We had our needs covered, and we even had certain things like movies and theater. It was just Jewish, that was where Jewish people were.
And how big was that area?
Oh, I'd say it was very big.
And the Japanese were in charge of you there?
Well, there was some military presence, yes. That's all.
But you didn't have to do any work.
No. Not as far as I knew.
Did the Japanese ever kill any Jews in the ghetto?
No. Certain people were imprisoned, I believe, but...
So they did not share the Germans' view of the final solution?
Right, Japanese did not. As far as I knew, I don't know. Japanese basically kept their hands off of us.
And from 1943 till 1945, till the liberation, what were you doing?
I was waiting. I was just waiting to get out of China, to go back to Europe or to America or somewhere else.